I don't think, yeah, and I'm audio too. All right. Last class of the kingdom. I don't know whether you're as happy as I am or not, but we'll be plunging into something else next week. I think I'll probably get through what's in here today. So let's get started. New heaven and new earth. So this is the last piece. This is what happens after judgment. This is kind of the time. Remember we talked about the prophecy concerning the kingdom, getting in the kingdom, and then finally giving the kingdom back. So Revelation 21, and 21 and 22 are pretty short too. Then I heard a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. So, which heaven is this? The new heaven. But what heaven is it new? What was the old heaven?
Probably the sky with 1,000 birds and the universe itself.
It's part of the physical part, not the spiritual part. Does the spiritual heaven ever go away? No. Sometimes people say it's heaven. The old heaven God was in went away, and then we have a new heaven. It's not. How about the New Jerusalem? What does that represent? It would be heaven. Who was in the original Jerusalem? What kind of people were they? The Jews, okay. Remember, a lot of this is figurative in what it's talking about. You could look at it a little bit broader to say what's in the New Jerusalem, and what was in Jerusalem would be all of God's people. It's a broader look than just looking at it from the standpoint of just a group, but all of God's people. And it's where those God's people they're going to be. Isn't that where the temple was? Isn't that where the king was? Isn't that where God came every year?
Worship.
Yeah. Why is there a new heaven and new earth? This is easy. Huh?
Ain't going back on the old.
The old one's gone. It's been burned up. Doesn't exist anymore. So why did they have to have a new heaven and an earth, a new earth? Why is there a new one and a new heaven and a new earth?
Or the new covenant, isn't it?
Well, he all said you were going to be with God. But why didn't we just go to the spiritual heaven? Yeah, there's a lot of things about the new heaven that's a whole lot better than it is. I can think about things every morning when I get up that I'm not going to have to contend with.
It's like it's like a wedding for a bride. It's beautiful.
Yep.
And all decked out.
Yep.
But it says the first earth passed away,
Earth passed away.
There has to be a new one.
so they had to get a new one.
How about the new one? Let's look at Corinthians. So also the resurrection of the dead, it is shown a perishable body, it is raised an imperishable body. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living soul. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. Who's the last Adam? We know who the first Adam is, right? Adam. Who's the last Adam? Jesus, yeah, Christ, okay? One brought physical life, the other one brought spiritual life. And what Paul is contrasting here is the physical body versus the spiritual body. But there's both bodies, right? However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, then the spiritual. The first man is from earth, earthly. The second man is from heaven. As is the earthly, so are those who are earthly. And as is the heavenly, so also are those who are heavenly. Just as we have borne the image of the earthly, we also bear the image of the heavenly. Okay, so the image of the earthly is the physical part of us. The image of the heavenly is we're made in the image of God. Okay. I think there has to be a new heaven and a new earth, because where the spiritual body is going to go. I mean, otherwise he wouldn't have had to create it, right? Everybody's gone through judgment. Everybody's been resurrected. Everybody that's written in the book of life spends eternity with God. Everybody who's not in the book of life goes to a place prepared where Satan was prepared. Okay, so that's, I think, why there's a new heaven and there's a new earth, is because that's where we're going to be. That's where we're going to exist. Okay. Already asked that one. Already said something about that. Okay. And I heard a loud voice from the throne, so we're back to that part in Revelation, saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people. And God himself will be among them, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death, nor will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away." So how is this a similar situation described here to what is in the beginning of Genesis? This just occurred to me. Maybe it doesn't occur to anybody else. That's fine.
Created, so it'd be
Huh?
in the beginning, God created, so he would create our new heaven and
New heaven, new earth. Okay. Okay, so there are some similarities.
Maybe the relationship of one-on-one, seeing God, walking with God in the beginning, till they lost it, it'll be back to that. Okay?
That's what I saw when I looked at it, was that relationship, direct relationship between a place prepared for man or for his creation, and face to face they talked with each other. And now we've got a place prepared for his children, and face to face they talk to each other. You know, it's bookends between Genesis and Revelation. Is everything in the middle is how we get back there to where we got kicked out from in the beginning. Rob?
Well, this would take me a week at least to go through this, but when you look at the garden, if you eat, you will die. You will surely die. He ate, she ate.
Oh, okay.
Not physically, spiritually.
Right.
Through Adam, sin entered into the world, and with that sin, fellowship with God was severed.
It was the knowledge of sin entered the world.
Right.
Okay.
And because of that sin, they were cast out of the garden.
Yeah.
And one man, Christ, reunited that possibility of man being in fellowship with God once again.
That's the second Adam.
So if you have this old system, I think one of the things that has come to my mind is when Jesus offered his invitation to man, "Come unto me." He's talking to Jews. Their system was a very difficult system to live in. They had the law, but the law couldn't provide righteousness. Every year they could go in on the Day of Atonement and offer a sacrifice for sin, but that sin was always remembered. It continued on. But Jesus provided righteousness and a new way of life. And now we can have that he entered into that holy place with God as an intercessor for us, Jesus, that we now can have access to God directly, not through the temple, the old temple.
Right.
And so,
The only person who could access him through the temple was the high priest.
yeah.
It was one person.
And Jesus became our high priest,
Yeah.
not according to Aaron, but according to Melchizedek. He's a different kind of high priest.
Right.
And so we have a new system, covenant we live under, which provides us that new spiritual Jerusalem that wasn't there. Are we in a spiritual kingdom where
Yeah.
there's neither male nor female, bond or free? We're in a different kingdom now.
Right. Right.
And so that new kingdom we're in is not like the old physical kingdom of Israel. And that old physical kingdom of Israel had to be destroyed because God promised he would destroy it in Deuteronomy 32. And so all the curses of Deuteronomy 8 through 32 came upon Israel that God was going to wipe them out.
Yeah.
And in 70 AD, he did wipe them out.
Well, yeah. He allowed the Romans to wipe him out. Yeah.
Anyway,
But yeah.
I got a week to go.
Yeah. You got what? 6 days, 23 hours. So it just kind of occurred to me, looking at Revelation, looking at the last book of Revelation, the last chapter in Revelation, well, next to last chapter of Revelation, versus the first chapter in Genesis, was we got back to where we were. And it took a long time to get back there. We're part of the spiritual kingdom, but we'll be physically in our spiritual bodies in the spiritual kingdom. And that's a big difference. Rob?
In this new city that you're talking about, what's outside of the city?
Don't know. Doesn't describe it.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
Liars,
huh?
the liars.
Well, they'd be kept out.
No, they're outside the city, not kept out, but they're outside of the city.
Well, we'll get to that.
The New Jerusalem, the old had walls around it, and if you were outside of Jerusalem, people looked at you as being lost, that you were a pagan, that you weren't protected by that city of Jerusalem that people looked at as their whole life.
Let me talk to that a little bit. When we talked about it, when it talks about it in Revelation, all the people in the book of life are with God. All the people that are not in the book of life are thrown into the fire. So I'm not sure what's outside the walls, but those that are not in the book of life, which would be the liars, which would be the people who are faithless to God, would be there. So that's why I said we don't know, because he doesn't describe what's outside the walls. He just says there's two places you go. There's no middle place, there's just two places you go. So what's it going to be like for us in the new heaven and the new earth? Is that me? Okay. No? It is me? We've been recorded, Rob.
In verse, you might read in verse 14 of Revelation 22.
I'll get to that, hopefully. Okay. So what's going to be like for us to be in the new heaven, new earth?
Nothing that we've ever experienced before.
I'm sorry?
Nothing that we've ever experienced.
Nothing like we have experienced. Yeah, that's true. I get up every morning, my back, my hip, my ankle.
I guess there won't be any more temptations.
I have to agree with that. I'm not sure there'll be any more temptations. Because where's the tempter? He's gone. No crying, no pain, no mourning. We won't have any more loss.
Once the order of all things were paid, passed away, everything's gone. Everything that we know now is not.
Well, when the old heaven, the old earth, when they passed away, all that went away. But when your physical body got translated into your spiritual body, that spiritual body is eternal. The physical body was never meant to be eternal. And he who sits on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new." And he said, "Write, for these words are faithful and true." Then he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of water of life without cost. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But for the cowardly and the unbelieving and the abominable and the murderers and the immoral persons and the sorcerers and the idolaters and all those liars, they will be thrown in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." So he makes a distinction here, but my questions are more focused on who's going to be there, since that's us. So what does he who sits on the throne make new? What are the all things?
It would have to be, obviously, creation's gone, so life changed. Worship's changed. At least that much.
I'd say all things seem to mean the new heaven, new earth. This mortal must put on immortality. That's new. Just as when any man be in Christ is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things become new. So everything that's around, and that's one of the reasons why we have to have a new heaven and a new earth, because this earth and then the devil is a prince of this world, and God has to get rid of all of that.
All of that. Makes a new heaven, makes a new earth, makes a new bodies for us. It's a new relationship.
Yeah.
Us to be face to face with God hasn't happened since Adam and Eve in the garden. And that's a new relationship. Because when they had it face to face, and even afterwards, when they had eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there was that little time there before he kicked them out that they still were face to face. But when Elijah wanted to see him, he said, "You can't see my face. Not and live." But now we'll see his face. This is a new relationship. Everything's new. Who's the he speaking? Yeah, Jesus. The Alpha and the Omega. Beginning and the end. What does he declare as it being done? What's done? He said, "It is done."
I think it will be the completion of God's wrath and whatever.
It's a completion of his will, too. The having to be a intercessor for us because of constant sins is done. It's finished. We're all there. What's second death reserved for, and what is it? What's the first death?
I would think it's the second death is reserved for the ones who didn't comply to God's words and that
Yeah, it would be those that said, kind of 8 goes through a litany of what those people are, but those were people who were not godly. Weren't interested in following God, didn't care about God, didn't believe in God, didn't like God, hated God, whatever you want to put them in there. But I do like one time where one of Don Page said, "Think of death as separation." And the first death is separation from the physical world, the spiritual world. And the second death is separation from God. And the second death here is those people who are separated from God. I'm not even sure referring to it as eternity is good because time doesn't exist, but they're eternally separated from God. And that's the second death. The New Jerusalem. I've got 22 slides, that's why I'm moving along. And one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls of the 7 plagues came and spoke with me, saying, "Come, here I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. So he begins to talk about this new Jerusalem that's coming down. Which of the 7 angels do you think it was? There's no wrong answers, there's no right answers on this one. Remember what the 7 angels did? 7 angels with the 7 bowls of wrath, right? In the first 6, they were all the wrath that was being poured out. What did the 7th angel start? Really initiated judgment, didn't it? So, we don't know. It doesn't say. I think it could be the 7th. Who's the bride? No. Who's the bride? Us. Us. Yeah. Having the glory of God, her brilliance was like a very costly stone, as a stone of crystal clear jasper. Had a great and high wall with 12 gates, and the gates, 12 angels, and the names were written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. There were 3 gates in the east, 3 gates in the north, 3 gates in the south, 3 gates in the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So what does the number 12 represent? Rob's biting his tongue. It's going to be constant all the way through the end here. Go ahead.
There's a chapter in Ezekiel, I believe it's chapter 13, where God says, or Ezekiel is saying, "Why are you not spending time fortifying the walls around Jerusalem and preparing for the day of the Lord?" That day of the Lord was coming against Jerusalem, and of course it was going to be the Babylonians, and they were going to take the last 2 tribes into captivity. The first 12 tribes went into Assyrian captivity. So now you got all 12 tribes in captivity. And Jeremiah talked about how that those tribes that were carried off into captivity would be restored once again at a certain time, 70-year time period. Daniel, your favorite book, talks about
You remember that?
in that 70-year time period, the fullness of righteousness would be restored, but it would be after the punishment that was coming upon Jerusalem. And so during they'd be sent back and rebuild the temple, all that would happen, but there was only one reason he allowed those 2 tribes to continue on, was to bring about the Messiah. And that Messiah, the Lamb, would be the culmination of God's plan. In the fullness of time, here's what God did. And so the 12 tribes would be reunited once again. Not all of them, but a remnant of those 12 tribes. And so I think the book of Acts really shows that God went to the Jews first and then to the Gentiles, and it's showing that the salvation now, because it went to the Jews first, was open to all nations, and so the Gentiles were allowed to come in.
Well, certainly that context as far as the history, the 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem, which he prophesied when he walked through and they looked at the temple and the Passover, and he says, it won't be even a stone on top of each other. Okay, it'll all be destroyed, and talks about that in Matthew. But I think the point that Revelation's getting to here is, who were the leaders, or the lead-in to God's people underneath the Old Covenant? The 12 tribes. They represented God's people. They didn't do a very good job of it, but we don't do that good a job either. The 12 apostles were those ones who were bringing it to the world. It went from just God's people, who were the Jews, to God's people, to those who had faith in God. So it was very broad. So the 12 there, to me, is where they have, you have the 12 gates that are after the 12 tribes. They showed the initial way, and then it was built up upon, I don't know why John didn't talk about it or we didn't see it, but the cornerstone on that one was Jesus. But built on what Jesus said is what the apostles did. And then what we've done is we've built on what the apostles have. So that's basically saying all this came about because of those, the 12 and the 12. And that 12 is going to come through over and over in Revelation. 12 comes to represent those who brought God's people to God. I ask another one? Oh. Does this Jerusalem look like the earthly Jerusalem? No. The walls aren't even close. I mean, I started to look at that to correlate it, and it doesn't. It's because the real Jerusalem, it kind of goes up, and it goes over, and then it kind of comes down, and it goes across, and it goes over here like this. It's an interesting wall they have, and they have all the different gates, but they don't have just 3, 3, and 3, and 3 to make the 12. They have different gates and different number of gates on the walls. Why were the angels at the gates? Doesn't say. And at the gates, 12 angels. I'm assuming one for each gate.
Welcoming committee?
Could be welcoming, could be as a guard. Certainly when the cherubims were posted by God in the Garden of Eden, they were not welcoming anybody in, they were guards.
Maybe it's one welcomer and 2 guards.
There you go.
This is the new.
A greeter, yes, a greeter.
And
Oh.
we're talking about where Christ Church is. So, I don't know, I guess I'm looking at it as a positive, like,
It might be. It doesn't explain what the angels did there. Angels are mainly messengers. They could have been praising there at the gate. So, the one who spoke with me had a gold measuring rod to measure the city and its gates and its wall. This is interesting. And I don't know what versions of Bibles you have, so I'm gonna circle back to that real quick. And its gates and its wall. The city was laid out in a square, so each side was equal, right? If it's a square. And its length is as great as its width, and he measured the city of a rod. 1,500 miles, its length and its width and its height are equal. In other words, 1,500, well, we'll get to that one. And he measured the wall 72 yards, according to human measurements, which are also angelic measurements. Now, I read this one, I went, this isn't making any sense. What is the 1,500 miles a measurement of? And I put a little parenthetical note in there. You might have different Bibles with a different translation of what's in verse 16 and what's in verse 17. And it makes more sense.
12,000 furlongs.
144 furlongs versus 1,500 miles. There's no way I can kind of come up with a 12 or a 3 or a 10. But if you go back to the original, because I went to Young's literal translation, it's in King James, it's in, might be New American, this is American Standard. And it kind of is a reason why you study more than one version of the Bible. What's the square root of 144? 12. There's 12 again. So the 144 furlongs, what's that measurement of? The perimeter of the New Jerusalem. That's all it is. But it's 144 furlongs. The height, 72 yards, or it would be clearer if it was 144 cubits. 144 again. 12 times 12. It's the same number again and again and again. And you got to do square roots this morning. I'm teaching math to my grandson, so.
Does that mean there's gonna be math in heaven?
I hope so. Math is cool.
I know.
But it does, it's gonna be huge and it doesn't really matter because we're gonna be inside.
We're going to be inside. Some people have taken this to say, well, if I lay this out and I look how big a person is, then I can figure out how many people are going to end up in heaven.
So it's like,
That's not what it's talking about at all, Rob.
Well, there's so many people that I think misunderstand the Hebraic phrase, and so they're always looking for these numbers being literal numbers and not being figurative numbers. And nobody takes all the numbers in Revelation to be literal, and nobody takes all the numbers to be figurative. People pick and choose what number they want to believe, like the Jehovah's Witnesses used to believe 144,000 were the Jehovah's Witnesses, and then they got too many, that they got too big, and so now it's the heavenly 144,000 versus those that are on the earth. And so people, I think, miss the forest for the trees. But you're talking about this old Jerusalem. After 70 AD, where was that old Jerusalem?
It was rocks spread out all over the place.
Gone.
Yeah.
Well, if Jesus said he was coming to destroy that city, what came after that city? What was it that he was trying to impose upon people? That here's this new Jerusalem, this new covenant I'm going to make with you that's a spiritual covenant, and the gates of Hades cannot prevail against it because a king can't come against it with an army. Its walls are impregnable. Once you're in that kingdom, you have all the blessings of being in fellowship with Christ. So it's a spiritual kingdom, a spiritual Jerusalem. And so I think that you're going to get further. I want to let you get to the end of this, so I'll be quiet.
That's fine. That's fine. But, but you're right. When somebody tries to take what it says and says it literally is 144,000, no, it represents God's people. 144, square root of that is 12, 12. It's 12. It keeps coming out that those people who brought God's word, and there were people who still bring God's word up until the time of Christ, but there was a lot of them that had just polluted it. Okay, the priests weren't doing their job. And the apostles brought the word of God and said, you need to understand what it really talks about, what it really wants as God. Those are the 12 of the 12. And then you can see it coming in over and over again where it's being accentuated by what it's written in Revelation. You got something else?
Well, since I wasn't here for your whole summation, I want you to think about maybe this also is there was only one nation that was ever in a covenant relationship with God, and that was Israel. And 90% of the time when you hear the word harlot mentioned, it's talking about one who broke the marriage vow,
Mhm.
talking about marriage. That the harlot was Jerusalem. And that harlot was where Christ was killed. He wasn't killed in Rome. He wasn't killed in Russia. He was killed in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And because of that relationship, I mean, Rome never was in a covenant relationship with God.
No.
But all the blood from Abel on came down upon the Jews, Matthew 23, that because of their sin, they would go ahead and they would kill Jesus, they would kill his prophets, his apostles, they would chase them all over the planet. That persecution came from the Sanhedrin. They were the ones that sent Paul out on the way to Damascus. He was headed there to do a certain thing, persecute the Christians.
Right. Well, to continue persecuting the Christians. Yeah.
And so God said, I'm going to bring vengeance upon those that persecute you. That was the Jews.
Was the Jews, and then the Romans did a lot of persecuting too. I mean, you talk about what Nero did, and you talk about what I can't remember what his name was.
The Dalmatian, the localized part of Nero wasn't like the persecution. When they went into the synagogue, they were chased out of the city, and so it was the Jews who was guilty of killing all the prophets of the
Oh,
Old
the Jews. The Jews either jailed them or killed them.
And so
Yeah.
they were the ones that had to be punished, and God certainly punished them, you know.
Yeah.
And now they want us to go back over there and rebuild that temple and put David on the throne. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's people today. I just heard one the other day said, you know, there was a Jewish rabbi saying, if you believe in the Bible, you believe that Christians are going to help us restore Jerusalem again.
I don't know what that's in the Bible.
And well,
Unless he's twisted this to get us what he wants.
That's what I'm saying
Yeah.
is it could get us into World War III that these people are trying to get people to help these
Yeah.
Zionists rebuild the temple.
Yeah, and that's not at all what it says in Revelation. It's a total twisting of it to get what they want.
You got to get to 22. You can finish the book.
I got to the point, yeah. Okay, the material of the wall was jasper, and the city was pure gold like glass, like clear glass. The foundation stones of the city wall were adorned with every kind of precious stone, and I hope I can say the stones right. The first foundation stone was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardis, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. You notice how many stones there are? 12. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each with the gates with a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold like transparent glass. Why describe the city as the angel's done here?
Possibly to things that we can relate to.
Possibly how we can relate to. I always kind of thought, okay, all these things we hold as precious. You know, you adorn them, they're like that, like gold. Pearls for gates. In other words, things that are precious are just simple building materials in heaven. They're not precious. What's precious in heaven? Us.
The breastplate of the high priest,
The ephod.
what did it have on it?
12 stones. You know what the stones look like? You're stonemason. You all know what the stones look like.
But they weren't like diamonds, like we think of what's the most precious stones, but we still don't understand. God made sure that we could never figure out how to recreate that ephod. I mean, they tried it in the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah. Here's what some of the stones look like. I'm going to move on. Jasper. Notice their colors are bright. But you know the number of stones, and it's interesting, beryl and topaz have several different colors. Some of them are clear, some of them aren't clear. But why isn't diamond up there? May or may not be, may be a rabbit hole that I'm going into, I don't know. But how did they refine all of these stones? How do you refine these stones, all these stones? These stones and these stones. Huh?
You have to dig for
Yeah, well, you have to dig to find them. But don't they put them in a tumbler? Aren't they soft, relatively speaking? They can be ground, they can be... How do you refine a diamond? You put it in a tumbler, it's going to be in there forever. It's not going to do a thing. You got to cut it. You got to have the right tools to cut it. And I'm not sure they knew how to cut diamonds. But they sure know how to take these stones and turn them into precious stones. These are all semi-precious, at least in my mind. Even some of them that are like jasper and sardonyx and sardis and chalcedony. But these are what they have as just simple building materials.
So do you correlate that with us, with Christians, like a similarity as us being reshaped, us being humble, us being polished, us being
It could be. To make us something that's,
soft, and then once finished, we shine and beautiful.
yeah, well, it could be. It could
Maybe
be.
some of us have been in the tumbler a little too long.
Everything's a little too round.
It's beyond the description. It's just beyond our imagination.
But you have a similarity where he talked about it here. Again, the word of the Lord came up to the Son of Man, lamentation over Tyre, to say to them, thus saith the Lord. You have the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. You were in Eden. Remember I said kind of Eden started at the beginning, and then now we're here at the end in Revelation. Every precious stone and covering. Now this one they talk about the ruby, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the lapis, one of the things my wife likes. Turquoise, the emerald, the gold, the workmanship, the sockets, all those things you had, and are gone. And now you've got them back again. Okay, so to me that kind of looked at the bookends between the two books. So it's similar. The one Ezekiel talks about at the beginning and the one that talks about at the end. They have similarities. I'm almost out of 21. I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are his temple. And the city has no need of the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God has illuminated it. And its lamp is the Lamb. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. In the daytime, for there will be no night there, its gates will never be closed, and they will bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. And nothing unclean, and no one who practices abomination or lying shall ever come into it, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Where does the light originate from? I'm going to run out of time.
What did Jesus say he was?
He's the light of the world.
Those that come to Jesus walk in the light as he is in the light.
Yeah.
And that there's other people that don't walk in the light.
Moses comes to mind for me. When Moses communed with God and he came back down on the mountain, his face was shining because it's the purity, because he communed directly with God. I don't think he saw God, but he was in his presence. Okay, what does not exist for the heavenly Jerusalem that was prominent for us here in the creation?
Wasn't something separated?
Yep. Come on, Rob, give it. It's night. You can read 22, but we're going to pick up next week unless you want to try and go through 22. I'll leave that up to you. But thank you for your attention. Thank you for your comments. Sing the